Morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the latest webinar in the Mobility Ways Thought Leader series. So let's set the scene. As of this week, average petrol at UK forecourts is sitting around £1.58 per litre. Diesel is nudging £1.91, and these are levels that we haven't seen since the summer of 2022. And since late February, diesel prices have risen about 39 pence a litre, with analysts warning that 190 pence plus is increasingly likely as wholesale costs continue to feed through. Now, for a diesel driver doing a typical commute, a fuel tank now costs around £100. And here's what that actually means in practice. The average round commute in our survey is 24 miles a day. At current diesel prices, that's £100 a tank, and that gets you roughly 4 weeks of commuting. So just over a month of getting to work for £100. Now, the government's 5p fuel duty cut stays in place until the end of August this year. But from September, fuel duty is scheduled to be increased in stages back to pre-22 levels by March 27. If that happens as planned, the underlying cost trajectory for petrol and diesel commuters really points in one direction, regardless of what happens in the Middle East. So for your employees, this isn't an abstract number. It's a real immediate squeeze on take-home pay every single working week. And most of them have no obvious way to insulate themselves against it. We wanted to understand how this is landing with commuters. So you should see up on the screen now. The end of March, Mobility Ways surveyed 894 commuters. And the picture that emerges goes well beyond transport costs. 45% of petrol and diesel drivers say that rising fuel costs have directly affected their commute. 30% of respondents report an impact on their daily lives more broadly, with some cutting back on food and other essentials, and others actually actively considering job opportunities closer to home. And one respondent put it plainly, fuel is expensive, puts me off going to the office, and if I go in, I'm doing work I could do from home, so it seems like a waste of money. Now, the demand for employer action is clear. 48% of commuters say they want more support from their employer to adopt sustainable travel, and that's up from 42% last year. The most requested measure is financial incentives for sustainable commuting, and 42% say that the fuel crisis has made them view electric vehicles more positively, with several having already purchased an EV or an e-bike in direct response. And that's exactly why we're here today, because employers can actually do something to support staff, not in 6 months, right now. And through salary sacrifice schemes on EVs and cycling, organisations can give their workforce a genuinely affordable route off petrol and diesel vehicles while reducing your own national insurance liabilities and making measurable progress on Scope 3 Category 7 commuting emissions. And we've got two brilliant partners joining us to show you exactly how. Jamie Milroy, CEO of Dash Rides, will cover cycle to work schemes and why it's more relevant today than it's ever been. And Andy Neville from Octopus EV will walk through the EV salary sacrifice case, the financial logic for employers and the impact on your workforce. Now, before I hand over, I want to run a quick poll to establish what stage of the journey you're at in your organization. You should see it flashing up on your screens now. And if you just hit that so we can kind of see where each of you in our audience are at. And while we're waiting for the results to come in, just to say that we'll have a Q&A from around 11:35, and at the bottom of your screen, you'll see the option to pop your questions in for Andy and Jamie towards the end. So let's have a quick look. Do we have the results? Maybe not. There we go. Okay. So 10% not familiar at all. We've got 20% that currently have schemes in place, but for the majority of our audience, looks like today is going to be super relevant. So we're going to hand over shortly. Just before we do, we'll say that Mobility Ways have got a brand new resource, which is our fuel savings calculator. There should be a link in the chat right now. So actually, if you want to go on to the Mobility Ways website, either now or after the webinar, you can actually look through and see how, by keeping the same number of employees and increasing participation in, for instance, carpooling, public transport, EVs, and active travel by just 2% each, that really the results are extremely, in terms of cost savings, meaningful. Really, the headline message is that with relatively small increases in modal shift, the cost savings are large. And I suppose the higher the fuel price is, the higher the savings. So that's enough from me. I'm going to hand over to Jamie now. So, Jamie, great to have you with us, and I'll hand over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Finn. And yeah, thank you very much for inviting me on Mobility Ways. Delighted to speak to you all. I'm Jamie. I'm one of the founders here at Dash. We have a very, very simple mission as an organization, which is to get more people cycling. And we are laser focused on reinvigorating the UK Cycle to Work scheme to affect that mission. If you put next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about three things, as sort of Finn addressed. So why Cycle to Work is more relevant than ever, how it's being used by employers and employees to address sort of cost of living challenges and what we're seeing in the market. And then lastly, how we can help organizations increase the uptake of their Cycle to Work scheme to sort of realize all of the benefits that I'm going to cover. Next slide. So for those of you who maybe aren't familiar with the scheme, it sounds like 30% of you don't have one and 10% aren't familiar. So there's a decent chunk of you perhaps. Cycle to Work is what's called a salary sacrifice scheme. So it allows employees to give up a portion of their earnings in exchange for a benefit, being the bike and related sort of cycling equipment and accessories, thereby saving on income tax and national insurance. And as Finn sort of highlighted, it also saves employers on employers' national insurance savings. So some very sort of significant financial reasons to do it just in there alone. But it also does all of these things for you. And I think with Cycle to Work, because it has sort of a broad appeal across lots of different stakeholder groups. Each stakeholder group sort of comes at it from its own perspective, and maybe that holistic picture of all the things it can do for an organization sometimes gets lost. So I thought this would be a good place to start. These are all the things I think it achieves. I think they are all exceptionally relevant at the moment, and we'll come on to sort of what we're seeing and what gives me that confidence in saying that. But physical health, I think, is pretty obvious. Being physically active has enormous health benefits. I'm reminded of a very large Scottish study that was about 80,000 participants over an 18-year time horizon that found that the cyclists within that sort of population had a 50% lower all-cause mortality rate than their non-active commuting counterparts. They had lower experience of cancers, heart disease. So, all the benefits of just being physically active. But cycling to work is a really, really easy way for people to sort of get that level of exercise into their sort of daily routine. Because, we're all very busy people. So just having it sort of, easy way to get in, I think is really beneficial. Productivity, enormous benefits in terms of your sort of creativity levels, your concentration levels, also sick days. Cyclists are estimated to take about 4.5 days off sick less per year than their non-active commuting counterparts. That is a very, very meaningful and often hidden saving that organizations could be achieving. As Finn's already said, sustainability, this tends to be one of the main avenues in which sort of Cycle to Work is viewed under, but it's roughly approximate to about 1.5 tons of CO2, switching from your car to an e-bike or a bike, which is a significant number. There's also almost zero particulate matter emissions. Certainly, I know a lot of our NHS customers, that's a very, very important type of emission that's often overlooked, but very important to sort of mitigate. Mental well-being, again, lots of this is just linked back to the physical activity levels, but cyclists are statistically 20% less likely to suffer from mental health conditions. So really, really important thing there. You'll often hear of it described as sort of the cyclist high, colloquially. So, fantastic way to sort of arrive into work. Savings is probably the big one that we're sort of experiencing at the moment. This applies to both employees and employers. So, we estimate there's about £1,000 saving per year for people switching to cycling. So big number for employees. And employers, those employer NIC savings are becoming increasingly important as the sort of costs of employment are going up. Many organisations are pursuing return to office strategies, clearly offering something that can help employees get in to work and give them a benefit for doing so. It is increasingly important, and we're seeing Dash play quite a significant role in some of our clients' return to office strategies. And then lastly is really just around employee experience. So 76% of employees consider benefits to be of essential importance when evaluating job offers. So offering great benefits like a great cycle to work scheme, a great EV leasing scheme, all contribute to sort of that package that you're presenting out to the world as you go to recruit talent and indeed to retain it. So really, really important there. Next slide, please. So that's why I think cycle to work is as relevant as ever. In terms of what we're seeing out in the market about how it's showing up, especially given the sort of current period we're in, the sort of employer response has been quite dramatic, if I'm honest. So we've seen in the last 30 days a 216% increase in employer inquiries to look at offering Dash as a cycle to work scheme, which obviously sort of correlates roughly with the sort of Iran crisis that we're sort of seeing versus the preceding 30 days. So that's been a really, really notable change in the sort of market from our perspective. Within that number, we're also seeing a significant increase in the number of companies introducing the scheme for the first time. And the rising fuel prices is being cited as a sort of top 3 issue or motivator that is behind the reason for why they're looking at this now within this current cohort. So this is a very, very relevant topic. There's lots of employers being very proactive about this and how they can sort of help their employees out. And to sort of transition into sort of how this is showing up for employees, I think the first thing to do is a bit of context setting. So employees are very reluctant typically to sort of raise financial pressures with their employer. So just 23% of Gen X employees would ever feel comfortable discussing money worries with their employer, and that's versus 42% for Gen Z and 37% for millennials. So under half in all cases feel confident about raising money worries. And that's not to say they don't have money worries. They are there. They're just a silent issue that's going on, sort of affecting their performance, their state of mind, etc. So this is quite a crucial issue for people at the moment. In terms of how cycling to work can sort of help, I sort of covered it briefly, but just to sort of give it some numbers, £100 of electricity on an e-bike can roughly do 1 full circumference of the Earth, versus £100 of petrol at the moment we sort of estimate would struggle to get you from London to Edinburgh and back. So quite a stark correlation or contrast there in terms of how far your money can go with these two different vehicles. And as I said previously, we estimate that someone switching their commute from a single occupancy car or even public transport to cycling can save around £1,000 a year. And another way to look at that is it's effectively the equivalent of someone earning or being given a £1,500 pay rise. And I'm sure most people would be very, very grateful and welcome a £1,500 pay rise. Well, that's effectively what everyone's got within their grasp if they are willing to sort of try and give cycling to work a go. So I think really, really important that this is sort of shared with employees right now, because I think this is a moment of maximum impact in terms of trying to get that modal shift to occur. Next slide, please. So how can we help at Dash? Well, first, I'll just go into a bit more detail around what we exactly do in case you're not familiar with us. But we're a cycle to work platform. We have completely redesigned the operating system on which the scheme sort of functions, transforming it from a scheme that sort of used, outdated and sort of restricted vouchers. I think typically that's probably how everyone who's familiar with Cycle to Work will sort of know of it. And we've transitioned it into something as fast and intuitive as modern online shopping. The whole platform is underpinned by 4 key attributes benefiting employees, being choice, flexibility, convenience, and clarity. And importantly, it gives employees 3 different ways to access a bike within one coherent platform. That being our flexible subscriptions, the traditional sort of purchase option that everyone knows about, buying a bike through Cycle to Work, and lastly, all access to bike share providers up and down the country. These would be providers such as Lime and Forest, Beryl, Voy, the types of bikes where you turn up, you use it for as long as you want, and then you leave it at your destination, which are becoming increasingly popular within sort of micromobility. Why is this important? It means that as a platform, we can appeal to the broadest possible range of employee preferences in terms of how they want to go cycling. And it also means that as and when they do make that decision, there is the least amount of friction possible in between them making that decision and actually getting riding and starting to achieve the benefits. And that sort of as a total package is what leads us to sort of, being able to achieve the sort of outcomes behind the quote on the bottom of that, bottom of this slide from a recent customer of our client of ours. Next slide, please. So given everyone sort of knows Cycle to Work as buying a bike, I thought it might be worth just diving into 2 of our products more specifically, and just thinking about how they might be really relevant in this given moment. The first is subscriptions. This is a flexible pay monthly all-inclusive service, very much as it says. It allows employees to commit for as little as a month, and pricing just starting at just £25 a month, and they get their own e-bike, everything included. And this is a fantastic way for someone who is new to cycling or maybe hasn't cycled since they were a child to just give it a go. They don't have the lock-in or the sort of big commitment that comes with a traditional sort of Cycle to Work transaction. So it's a fantastic way for people to get started. 2 of the stats that I always sort of come back to on this are, so we offer people the ability to commit for different lengths. The 2 shortest terms are 1 month and 3 months. And if you look at the people sort of engaging with those commitment lengths, they will on average go on to cycle for just over 10 months or just over 11 months respectively. They might change their sort of pricing structure in that time, but that's roughly how, on average, how long they go on to cycle for. Those 2 numbers are really important because had those individuals known from the outset that that's how long they were going to cycle for, they would have chosen one of the lower commitment the longer commitment lengths to benefit from the lower pricing that they attract. And what that says is that by offering these people a very, very sort of low friction entry point, it gets them onto the bike or e-bike, and it keeps them there for much longer than they ever expected. And I think that's a really sort of powerful metric in terms of our ability to affect that modal shift and get people cycling that perhaps weren't thinking about it otherwise. The other product to dive into, next slide, is our Dash Flex. So this is how we enable all access to all bike share providers with one card. You set your monthly allowance. It's paid for via salary sacrifice. So employees are typically saving somewhere in the region of a third to half of their sort of normal cost. But it gives them complete freedom to use those bike share providers however they wish. So they could ride a Lime bike into the office in the morning, a Forest bike home that evening. They could use part of their allowance for to get a minute bundle with one of those providers and have the rest of their allowance for pay-as-you-go rides across everyone else. But it just gives people complete freedom in how they access those services, which in our experience is a much better reflection of how employees use them in the wild. Certainly, I'm based in London. When I'm using these services, I will literally go to whichever bike is closest to me in any given moment. And Dash Flex allows me to do that. Next slide, please. So thank you very much for having me on and for listening. as I've sort of said, and I hope it's come across, I think there are some really powerful triggers or motivators for employers to start looking at their cycle to work scheme arrangements, and how they can really get the maximum out of the scheme. Certainly at Dash, we would love to work with anyone who is trying to get more people cycling. So please do get in touch. But now I will hand over to Andy at our friends over at Octopus EV. So thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Jamie, for that and for the handover. I'm Andy. I work at Octopus EV, have done so for about 4 years. So seen our salary sacrifice proposition grow from its infancy into what it is now today, with over 43,000 cars on the road, the largest EV leasing fleet in the country. And I think I'm on my third fuel crisis in those 4 years as well. So quite prevalent where we are today to talk about things. Next slide, please. So as Octopus EV, we are part of the Octopus Energy Group, founded under the feeling that EVs are going to play a huge part in the energy system going forward. And that kind of landed us on EV salary sacrifice. And what we want to do is encourage people to make that switch into more sustainable transport system by making it more affordable, more desirable to make that switch. So what they can do is get all of their motoring costs wrapped up into one salary sacrifice. The only other cost they'll have other than that gross salary sacrifice will be for the energy to charge the vehicle. And of course, being part of the Octopus Energy Group, we have solutions for that should people want them. So included in your sacrifice, you get the car, you get all your servicing, maintenance and repair throughout the course of the lease. That includes new tyres, breakdown cover, fully comprehensive insurance. There's early termination protection as well, which means if you do leave your business midway through a lease, then you can hand that car back free of charge, provided you have had that on the road for more than 3 months. Also bundled in, we do have charging solutions. So we want to encourage people to do this and make it easy for them to switch to EVs. So we'll either give a free home charger and we'll install that with our engineers for free as well. But if you don't have off-street parking, or maybe you don't want a charger, you already have one, you live in a flat, you can't get it, we have our own public charging network as well. So what we do is we'll give you 4,000 miles worth of public charging credit to kickstart your journey of being an EV driver. We also do have exclusive discounted home energy tariffs as well. And I'll talk about those in a few more moments. That's kind of the what of what we do. And now I'll talk about the why and how it relates to the current global situation and fuel crisis. Can I have the next slide, please? So I'm going to just run over a few things, how rising fuel prices are affecting employees right now. As mentioned earlier, it costs a lot of money to drive to work. We want people to come into the office, but perhaps they're more reluctant to do so now. Everybody's feeling the squeeze a little bit. How and why employers like yourselves can help, and how you can protect your workforce from that. Next slide, please. As we know, those numbers that were mentioned at the start in terms of fuel prices, petrol and diesel prices move with the price of oil, and they are subject to global events. By running an EV, you can have more protection against those shifts. We've got quite a robust energy system in terms of electricity in the UK, lots of renewables. Great thing about renewable energy is it's cheap, it's clean, and we've got absolutely loads of it. So we're less susceptible to price movements. They're less extreme. Good thing for us as well is only about 5% of our gas mix comes from the Middle East. We are overall affected by the global prices, but hopefully we're not going to be so affected by that as well. EVs aren't just the green choice for your employees to drive more sustainably, but they're a necessary move away from an oil-based system. Currently, EVs are reducing oil demand by around 1.7 million barrels per day, but there's still a lot more that we can do as people transition to a more sustainable transport system. Next slide, please. Salary sacrifice isn't just a perk for your employees, it's protection against the fuel crisis. We can move them away from a large variable monthly cost they can be more certain about how much it is going to cost for them to move around and get to work. We are seeing that people who charge overnight at home, when the cost of renewable energy there's lots of it on the grid, so it's super cheap overnight. We offer charging at reduced rates. So if you do have our salary sacrifice scheme, it's 7p overnight. That can be a cost of £2 or £3 to fully charge your vehicle, and that can be up to kind of 300 miles in that sense. The EV salary sacrifice scheme as well, it does have early termination protection, as I mentioned. So if they leave your business via resignation, dismissal, or redundancy, they can hand that car back to us free of charge anytime after it's been on the road for 3 months. For impactful life events, things as a business you have no control over, they are protected from day one. So death, including death of a spouse, loss of driving license on medical grounds, long-term sickness, absence, and extended parental leave, they're all covered from the day that car is delivered. As an employer, you will benefit on saving as a result of your reduced wage bill, saving on your national insurance contributions. And we do encourage to make the leases even cheaper for your staff members, to pass back a portion of those national insurance contributions. But it's your money to do with whatever you want there. And this kind of relates into how EV schemes are going to be much more popular from schemes that also offer hybrids. In terms of the benefit in kind, you will pay a Class 1A national insurance linked to that benefit in kind, the tax on a benefit as an employer. That's linked to the benefit in kind amount. For an EV, we know it's going to grow, but very slowly over the next few years. It's going to be 9% by April 2030. At that point, the lowest emitting hybrid is going to be 18%. That means that offering vehicles, hybrid vehicles, will soon become less desirable for your staff members to take, not only because they're more expensive for them, but also for you to offer to them as well, as they become a cost for your business to be able to offer. As mentioned, it's almost like a pay rise for your staff members. They can save up to 40% on their motoring costs, but also with that added bonus of having much cheaper fueling costs or energy costs for their vehicle, supporting with your team's financial well-being and helping your sustainability and talent goals. Next slide, please. So as they make their deduction from their gross salary, they can save 20, 40%, whatever their tax benefit is. They will also be making in terms of fuel costs, saving over £1,000 annually compared to petrol cars. On the right-hand side there, we've got some comparisons of how much per mile it costs to fuel a MG4 EV versus a petrol Golf there. I think that 17p per mile would be even more expensive now. I'm not actually entirely sure of the cost of fuel. Being an EV driver for the last 4 years, I only set foot on a petrol forecourt to put some air in my tyres, and I don't really take much notice of the numbers on the screen anymore. Our package includes a free home charger, as I mentioned. If they do switch to our smart charging tariff, we'll give them 4,000 miles worth of energy to put into their vehicle as well. That looks like a credit of just £70, just to give you an indication of how cost beneficial it is if you do have the luxury of charging from home. Never fear, if you don't have the luxury of charging from home, we do give you a credit on our public charging network. I live in a terraced house in South London. I'm unable to charge at home. It's still a lot cheaper for me to put electricity into my vehicle than it is for me to put diesel or petrol into a car. Next slide. And for your business, it's a win-win for you. You can not only contribute to your own ESGs and save on your scope 3 emissions, contribute to those net zero goals that you might have. We will give you all of your emissions savings data as well. For that, comes in tons of carbon, but there's a nice fluffier amount of trees saved as well. So depending on who you're promoting that to, you can pick which metric you would like to use. Not only saving on your own employer's national insurance contributions, it can help you attract and importantly retain talent and save on your cost of recruitment as well. We find that 70% of employees are expecting their employer to work towards their goals, ESG goals. and 74% want their employer to offer an EV salary sacrifice scheme. And we've had a 36% spike in inquiries from individuals, not from businesses, about EVs over the past couple of weeks. Next slide, please. So just a recap on that. EV salary sacrifice can be the answer to today's business challenges, supporting your employees' financial and environmental well-being, move your workforce away from oil-based volatility, and help your business now more than ever. Next slide. My contact details.
Brilliant.
Back to you, Finn, in the studio.
Back to me. Yeah, I got the just got in there. Thank you ever so much, Andy. That was brilliant. Also, thank you to Jamie as well. So we've hit 11:30. Just before we go into Q&A, I want to draw your attention to the next webinar that we've got coming up on the 29th of April. So that's Wednesday, 10 till 12. And it's a workshop with Rona Pierce, who's going to be talking through some of the regulation changes for 2026 and what that means for your organisation. So you should, if you're attending this webinar, be signed up to our mailing list and have already received an invite for this. If not, then the details are on the Mobility Ways website. Great. So thanks again. Let's bring up, if we could bring Andy and Jamie back into the room. So we've got a couple of questions and a couple more coming through now. I think maybe just before we hand over, and just a reminder for our audience, there are the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So if you hover over that, if you've got a question for Andy or Jamie on EV salary sacrifice schemes, get that in, and we'll make sure that we get those questions over. So a couple I just thought I'd kick off with. So Jamie, just starting with you. So I mean, Cycle to Work's been around now for 20 years, and a lot of large employers already have a scheme in place. So what's going on with traditional schemes? Why is the uptake kind of consistently so low?
Gosh, so I think the challenge with Cycle to Work is there's almost like there's lots of misconceptions about what it is and how it works and all this sort of stuff, but there's almost a misconception behind the misconceptions, which is that the scheme is the way it is because that's how the rules say it has to be. And I think that's it's been a very reasonable assumption for employers to hold for a long time, because as you say, I think it's actually 26 years or 27 years this year the scheme's been around. And fundamentally, throughout that lifespan, it's basically been delivered exactly the same way through that sort of voucher process, which I would describe as a little bit certainly outdated now, also quite cumbersome. And I think, the misconception is that that's how the process has to be, and that's just not the case. So where all the sort of friction that sort of drops out of that sort of shows up for employees, and why the scheme has the sort of low uptake that it historically has, is because employees are confused as about how the sort of process works from start to finish. It's quite opaque, in terms of like, how do I go from requesting this voucher through to getting actually what I want? Often employees are being forced to sort of make that decision at a time in the year when they otherwise wouldn't, because of benefit sign-up windows. Lots of employers say, the month of January is when you have to make your benefit selection for the entire year, and after that you sort of lose access to them. And equally, inherent in that is you're having to make an entire year's worth of sort of purchasing decisions, which, if I was to put you in front of Sainsbury's or Waitrose and said, Finn, I want to know right now at the entry, A, how much you're going to spend for the entire year, and B, what on, but you're not allowed to go in and look at what's in there. You're not allowed to see the pricing. I think you'd look at me slightly confused and befuddled, and quite rightly so, but equally that is exactly what everyone's been asking employees to do when it comes to Cycle to Work for many, many years. So I think when you sort of unpack all of that, the reason for the low uptake sort of becomes quite self-evident. But importantly, that really doesn't have to be the case.
So, I mean, you there was in your slide, I think 1,000% increase one of your clients had. So, I mean,
Yeah.
anecdotally, I know from conversations we've had, Dash consistently delivers, better uptake than traditional providers. So, what exactly are you doing differently? What does that look like in practice for an employer
Yeah.
who's perhaps tried the traditional route before and been a bit disappointed?
Sure. I think it goes back to those four sort of key attributes that I sort of set out around, really the ethos and behind which our platform is built. So it's choice and flexibility, and those two characteristics are really, really important, because it means that employees, any employer has a very, very diverse sort of range of employees. They all have different preferences. They're all at different stages of their sort of journey, maybe to consider cycling. And giving them that choice and flexibility means you've got the sort of widest possible appeal. So if you think about your sort of top of funnel, if we were to sort of put this into sort of sales and marketing parlance, it's making sure that funnel is as wide as possible at the top. The other two attributes then are the sort of convenience and the clarity. And that's essential to get those people from the top of that funnel down to the bottom of it, because it's all well and good you having this massive broad appeal and flexibility. But if it's not easy for people to use the benefit, and indeed they don't understand how to use it, they're not going to. So you really do need all four of those. And I think that's why the sort of platform is built with those four characteristics as behind it. So to give that sort of more practical explanation, it allows us to do things like offer the subscriptions, which are great for people who want to cycle just over summer, or maybe someone's new to cycling. It allows us to offer the bike share schemes, which are fantastic for maybe someone like Andy who lives in a terraced house, maybe doesn't have lots of room for parking bikes or whatever. It allows him to just go out onto the street, use a line bike, leave it at his destination, job done. But it also gives us the flexibility, because we're not tethered to a voucher network, of doing quite cool things, of saying, if someone needs something very bespoke or highly specialized, like an adapted cycle for people of differing abilities, they can just tell us where what product they want, and we can go and get it and bring it, make it, and enable that purchase for them on the platform. So it just gives us all that sort of wiggle room, basically, to get people what they want.
E-bikes are clearly expanding kind of who the scheme is relevant to, and we, in all of our modelling through Commute IQ. So, for anyone unfamiliar with Commute IQ, postcode heat mapping for employers, and actually when we lay our isochrones over the client site, and when we do that for traditional bikes and e-bikes, I mean it's just remarkable the volume of staff who could theoretically cycle in when you consider the average commute time on a cycle. So
Yeah.
given e-bikes are kind of changing the landscape, I guess, what are you seeing in terms of uptake with your clients? What distances are now realistic that you're being reported, and how does that change the conversation with employees who maybe previously ruled themselves out?
Sure. So I think the rough data on this is average sort of person cycling a normal pedal bike will sort of happily commute 6 miles. That's the sort of average. When you sort of overlay that to an e-bike, it goes up to about 12 miles, just slightly under. And if you think about your sort of organization as, if you've got a central office that everyone works from, and you draw that sort of radius, or that's, circles, the e-bike circle is significantly larger by area than that sort of normal cycle. So that's making e-bikes available, making them accessible, particularly through the sort of likes of our subscriptions, which dramatically drops the price point for them, is clearly really important if you're trying to sort of get more people to consider cycling that otherwise wouldn't. In terms of how it's showing up in the data, I mean, in the last 30 days, I can say we've probably seen double the volume go through the platform in terms of employee activity than the previous month. So people are really sort of voting, I was going to say with their feet, but maybe with their sort of pedals. So it's certainly happening. And I think, e-bikes, you're completely spot on. They just dramatically sort of expand the sort of scope of who can cycle practically. So we're all for them.
I think that stat that we actually begun with, the average commute distance is round trip 24 miles, so 12 miles, and actually that is in scope for an e-bike.
Right.
So yeah, so I mean, it just increases hugely, particularly if you've got a large cohort of staff who are kind of in that 6 to 12 mile bracket, they're not aware of alternatives. Could be a great way, of course, like to get people cycling. Okay, so question for you, which I'm then going to hand over to Andy as well, and then maybe Andy, we can look at Octopus following that. So this is more just around I guess, the cost concern and the kind of cost of living concern. So is salary sacrifice genuinely accessible to kind of the whole workforce, or does in from a dash perspective, does it tend to skew towards higher earners? Are there any considerations there for large employers?
Certainly. So, I mean, this is a feature of sort of all salary sacrifice, but one of the sort of key rules is that you're, as an individual and indeed as an employer, you're not allowed to, facilitate salary sacrifice below national minimum wage. So, for employees that are either on that level or just above it, there is a very sort of hard technical stop or blocker that prevents them sort of engaging with the scheme. Which is completely outside of our control. I think it's incredibly unfortunate. Arguably, the sort of people at the lower end of the income spectrum actually have the most to gain from doing these sorts of things. But that's beyond our control. What I then think is the sort of what employers should be thinking about and is important is then how do you sort of maintain a good level of access for the people that are just above that threshold. And again, going back to our subscriptions, I think that's where they actually come into their element, because by lowering the cost of an e-bike from a commitment of £2,000-3,000, understandably spread over 12 months, but into something that's just £25 a month, that means that the number of people at that end of the income spectrum that can still participate, can still benefit from getting an e-bike on salary sacrifice, goes up quite dramatically. So that's the sort of first thing I'd say around that. The other thing that we can do within our platform is we can sort of enable employees to shop on a net pay basis. So unfortunately, they don't get any of the tax savings associated with salary sacrifice for the reasons I've discussed, but they can still go into the platform. They can still sort of spend using their net pay and spread payments over a longer time horizon, not subject to sort of credit checks or anything like that. So you definitely can still deliver some benefit to employees. But unfortunately, they can't do salary sacrifice.
Yeah. Okay, well, I mean, it certainly sounds like there's a lot more flexibility, and I think from what you're saying in terms of the kind of 10-month average from somebody who actually tries something out for a couple of months, that it seems like that's bit of a halfway house through that full commitment. So the net alternative seems like a good thing for employers to put in front of their employees. So same question to Andy then. Hi, Andy. Sorry, bringing you in now. So what is this? What kind of same question to you around the skewing towards higher earners? It seems like a bit unfair, because actually when you look at everything that you guys are offering, and then you look at kind of a petrol lease, actually the net equivalent seems to be about the same, right? Depending on what vehicle you're getting. So what is it genuinely accessible again to some of the lower paid employees, or is there a similar case there that it's skewing towards higher earners?
I mean, traditionally, EVs have been quite expensive vehicles. So it has, when starting out maybe 4 or 5 years ago, it would be more aimed at higher earners who would be able to make that sacrifice for their lease and not take them under that national minimum wage threshold. There's been a lot of work done on getting price parity in terms of the cost of the cars. There's lots of great cheaper EVs that are brand new now as well, and with government grants that come in, makes them a lot more affordable and accessible for maybe the lower earners or people who have just decided they've got a smaller budget for their motoring. We're also offering approved used vehicles as well. So this opens it up, so it means the scheme can be more inclusive. These are all less than 4 years old, less than 70,000 miles on the clock. We fully refurb them to a high standard, make them available for second-hand salary sacrifice, and some of those vehicles can come with up to a 40% saving from their brand new counterparts. So we've been working to make it as accessible as we possibly can, to as much of the employee cohort from businesses as we can reach. In terms of a partnership with Octopus as well, we appreciate that with cars there will be people who are unable to access that, but we want a partnership with a business and Octopus to be more than that. So we do offer kind of switching codes, so other people at the business can benefit from a partnership with Octopus even if they can't get a vehicle, and we offer discounts from other home carbon tech as well, so money off heat pumps and money off solar systems as well. There's a cool stat, it's 73% of EV drivers more likely to then go on and get a second place piece of low carbon tech as well. And I appreciate if you can't afford an EV in the first place, you might not do that, but you might be tempted into, I can make some savings if I save some cash on energy at home by putting a solar installation in place instead.
So thanks for the explanation. Then I guess looking at employees who are approaching these lower earning limits or inflexible working arrangements, how does EV, particularly Octopus, this is salary sacrifice, interact with other benefits and kind of remuneration structures?
In terms of, the sacrifices combined, they can't, on our quote tool, you put in your details and it will tell you if a vehicle's unaffordable for you. It also gives you it flashes up if you're getting close. Now there's always a 10% buffer built into our quoting tool as well. And it will say, hey, check with your HR if you have other benefits, cycle to work, groceries, I think you can sacrifice now, childcare, whatever it might be, those combined, if they take you under, then you won't be able to go for this vehicle. So we always put it back onto check in with your HR to see if you are eligible for this benefit.
So let's just go to the I suppose the elephant in the room then, which is range anxiety, because it's the number one objection, I think, from employees. And so what's your answer to somebody who commutes, say 40 miles each way or regularly drives long distances? I appreciate you were talking about the if you can't do home charging, for instance, but how do you approach that, particularly that question around range anxiety?
I think you almost answered the question earlier with I know you've mentioned 40 miles, but the majority of journeys that people make from their house are less than 20 miles. And if you can charge at home, you just plug it in, like you top up your mobile phone overnight, you're never going to go underneath. Now, I can't charge at home. If I see a charger and I'm out with my vehicle, I just plug it in and top it up no matter where I am. If there's a free charger and I've parked up, I will plug it in and just give it a little boost. I think people also get range anxiety with their petrol. Oh, I need to get to a petrol station. It's a shift in mentality from where you run it down until the red light comes on and you scramble into the first kind of fuel station that you see. You're just kind of thinking a couple of steps ahead. So it's just a shift in mentality that, oh, I'll charge here, I'll charge there. On long commutes as well, long drives. I've got two young kids. I need to stop. I can't go 400 miles without stopping. Everyone would go crazy in the car. And the rapid chargers are so quick now. I'm almost geeing everybody up in the service station saying, come on, we need to get back to the car before it finishes charging. So there's lots of options. The public charging network in the UK is huge now. There's 1.2 million charge points in the UK. That's more charge points than petrol stations. There's lots of choice. We have our Electroverse network and app as well, and this will show you where every charger in the UK and across Europe and worldwide now is, how fast they are, what the cost of that charger is going to be, whether it's in use or not. You can use it as a route planner, so you can say, I need to get to here. It will work out the mileage. You say, I've got 20% battery in my car at the moment. It will work out where you need to stop, how long you need to stop there for it as well. So we've tried to develop as many tools as we can to stop that range anxiety. When I first started working in EVs, average on a car was probably 180, 200 miles for a lot of vehicles. it's now 300 miles for most vehicles. There's the BMW iX3 that can do over 400 miles. There's a Mercedes that can do 400 miles as well. It's getting bigger and bigger. The battery tech's getting better and better all the time as well. So hopefully that range anxiety question will start kind of dampening down a little bit.
Okay. And you mentioned BMW and Mercedes, and I can't help but imagine that they're one of the more expensive vehicles on the scheme. I could be wrong. But Tim Beston, who's in our audience today, is wondering kind of what the monthly payments start from.
So in terms of
In
for
terms of,
charge,
yeah,
yeah.
no, forget. So, if as a salary sacrifice, in terms of the net amount, kind of what would be the entry level?
For a car itself, you can have vehicles that start for all of your motoring costs in the 200s. I would say is one of the cheaper cars, and you can go up to how many added extras does someone want to put on their luxury Porsche or Maserati or whatever it might be. So there's a big range of vehicles for people to go for. In terms of charging, monthly cost for charging, if you do have the luxury of charging from home, our smart charging tariff, our Kraken system speaks to your smart meter. It tells it when it's got a abundance of renewable energy on the grid. If your car's plugged in, it will then charge for a half an hour period on that cheap rate. So whenever you're throughout the day, you can charge for, or if you're any Octopus EV driver, 7 pence a kilowatt hour. That means you can charge your car up for £2 or £3. For me, on the road, if I want to charge, there's some chargers at the end of my street. If I want to charge my car from 10 to 90%, it's probably about 25 or £30 at the moment. And that will give me 250 miles. If you look at somebody, I was talking to my dad who drives an Audi Q5 of petrol. His fuel costs have recently gone up from 80 quid for a tank to 120 quid for a tank, and that gets him about 350 miles. So even charging in public, a little bit less convenient than just pulling into a petrol station, but still a lot cheaper.
So, just to kind of now bring us around to kind of scheme delivery then. So the thing with in both cases, you're kind of have success stories with clients. And I think it would be really interesting to know from both of your perspectives what the single biggest mistake is that employers make when launching either of your schemes, and then kind of on the flip side, what your most successful clients are doing. Are there any kind of trends that our audience can take away to actually implement in their own organizations? Andy, do you want to kick us off with that one?
Yeah, the most successful schemes are the ones that promote, and when onboarding a business, what's important for us is it's your scheme and we're here to facilitate it for the business. So, what do you want to get out of it? How do you want to promote it? We can do events, we can flood your office with as many pink fluffy octopus toys as your heart desires, with QR codes, and really try and drive engagement through webinars and blogs and drive days, and what we can do to get people into cars. And we'll give lots of material as well, and marketing collateral to a business to promote it, whether that be email templates, kind of online stuff, or physical things throughout the office as well for people to look at. The schemes that are less successful are possibly the ones who take all the NI savings for themselves. We find that engagement on a scheme doubles if people are going to pass back that NI saving. It still remains cost neutral, but it can look like 40, 50, 60, 70 quid a month off somebody's lease price.
Okay, so same for you then, Jamie. Is there anything similarly? Is there anything you're seeing that commonly with your clients? Yeah.
Sure. So I'd agree with Andy around the sort of the communications. I think that's the sort of how people promote the scheme is probably the most overlooked part. The thing I think most employers, even the ones who do sort of think about that angle, get wrong, is there's too much emphasis placed on the launch comms. Everyone gets very excited because they're launching a benefit and it's new and it's shiny. I think what you have to try and do as an employer is sort of put yourself in your employee's shoes a bit and just think, how likely is it that in this 1 month of the year that I've chosen almost at random as an employer, is it that my employees are going to be shopping for what I'm trying to shift? So I think, when you sort of think about that, you realize actually you're trying to sort of thread the eye of a needle. And I think, therefore, the employers that we see get the most benefit are the ones that realise that and actually have a much longer term view on how to educate their employees, rather than just try and cram everything into the launch thing. Because what you really want is your employees to sort of be able to access the benefit at any time, and they've got the knowledge base to know that when that sort of decision point comes around in their lives naturally, that they know that the benefit's there and they know how to use it such that they do go and use it. So I think that's the thing that we see work the best. The things that go that sort of reduces the uptake the absolute most is the contra to that, which is restricting employees to just using it once per year in any given month, particularly if that month is one of the winter months. I can assure you it is a hell of a lot easier to get people cycling when it is warm and sunny outside than when it's snowing and rainy. So they'd be my top tips.
Yeah, and I guess just to kind of finish this off then, so for an employer who perhaps wants to offer both schemes, cycling and EV, how would you recommend that they're positioned so they kind of complement each other rather than compete? I mean, we would recommend making sure that you kind of group staff in cohorts where either is going to be relevant, and our tools help employers to be able to do that. But from your perspective, is there anything that you would recommend that in terms of the sequencing that would work best?
Good question.
Good question. Do you want to go first, Andrew? Yeah.
Well, I think we get a lot of sometimes the pushback is, we are city based. Everyone lives in Manchester or London, whatever. They decided they don't need cars. There's great public transport. I think that's where probably the cycle to work stuff comes into play a bit more. With EVs, more so less city driving. So I don't know if you'd position it more so around that. But I don't think they have to compete against each other in terms of benefits package. I think what's great for businesses is that you can have they can all be strings to the bow of a well-rounded benefits package. And what's great is giving your employees the option and the choice themselves how they want to use those benefits and take advantage of them.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't see these being competing products at all. I think if anything, they're very complementary. There's, rightly or wrongly, there are probably quite a few people in the population that are sort of weighing up the cost of a car or a bike. Most people recognise that for their sort of the way they live their lives, they do need both. So I think it's just about providing employees choice and ensuring they know that they're both schemes are available.
Thank you, guys. Listen, wanted to say a huge thank you to Andy Neville, Octopus EV, Jamie Milroy from Dash Rides. If anyone here today would like to contact Andy or Jamie, then I believe the details are at the beginning. We've recorded this. The slides will be sent out to everybody along with a copy of the recording after this. And of course, the webinar itself will be posted on our YouTube channel from later today. So we tend to get a lot of engagement there. If you want to watch it back, share the link around with colleagues internally, please do so. So I guess that just leaves us to say thanks once again to Andy and Jamie. Thanks all to you, our audience. I believe that's almost 12 o'clock, so time for lunch.